Hello, my name is Sam Robinson, and this is the Gnostic Syncretist channel and podcast. Thank you for joining us tonight. Everyone is welcome, no matter your background or belief system. All are welcome on this channel. Thank you for joining us tonight. And tonight we are going to go deeper and more in depth into the what I would like to call, and I do call, and many other people have called it this as well, the Archon Matrix of Control, and their long-term goals and plans in this matrix of control, and where they're leading humanity, and not to mention just where they're leading humanity, but where they're also leading Gaia herself, what they're doing to the earth as our environment and our sacred biosphere is just as important as what they're doing to humanity, because they're doing it to both of us. And it's an existential threat to not only ourselves, but all organic life that Gaia fosters and protects and guards on this sacred environment that we call Earth, and is also called Gaia. So, and I'm going to start by bringing up a very, very important caveat from this week, which has definitely worried people, though, of course, if you've been following the transhumanist agenda for any length of time, even though you may have had some hope that someone like RFK Jr. wouldn't take this route, let's be real. The forces that people like him are up against are far too vast for any one person, and he may never have been on the side of the environment in the first place, on the side of humanity. But regardless, what occurred this week is Senator Kennedy, and I swear this will relate back to the Archons and the sacred biosphere that we live in, Gaia Sophia, here in a moment. This week he was asked a question in Congress, and people were asking about what's called wearable technology for biometric data, and basically stuff that you can wear, like a Fitbit, like an iWatch, things that measure your glucose, measure your heart rate, measure your blood sugar, measure, any other type of thing that is wearable that measures your biometric data. And I would say harvest your biometric data. When he was asked what he thought about those technologies and where those technologies play into his agenda as the health secretary, the head of HHS, what he said was quite horrifying and appalling and extremely transhumanist. If you know if you know anything about it at all, he basically said, to sum it up, that he hopes to see in the next 4 years, by the end of the next 4 years, which is basically by the end of the Trump administration, every single American wearing one of these wearable technologies. Now, that was extremely concerning, and I don't think they're talking about forcing anyone to do this, but he is talking about doing an enormous marketing campaign over the next 4 years to try to get every American, which is like 350 million people, to wear these things, to wear some form of biometric harvesting device on the body, which is a step towards transhumanism. So, and how this relates to Gaia and the Archons is quite clear if you understand how this is all connected. And the Archons are non-physical, almost like astro-etheric, lower dimensional beings, and they hover around what's called the eighth sphere, and they want to turn the earth into what's called the eighth sphere in the Rudolf Steiner cosmology. And I know that thing, it's real arcane, but bear with me. Basically, they want to terraform the earth, but not in an organic fashion. They want to terraform Gaia, these Archons, and they want to transhumanize humanity. And this is fundamentally the biggest and deepest threat that not only humanity faces, but the entire world as a planet, as a planetary divine organic spirit and bearer of life forms that are also organic, this is an existential threat to both us and our divine habitat, and all inhabitants that are in our biosphere with us, animals, plants, all of nature. What this is an agenda to do is to turn us into a synthetic biological form of life, which is a degeneration of ourselves. And the reason the Archons want to do this, and the reason they invert everything and turn everything into a form of a synthetic iteration of it, they invert everything because they have no original anoia and no original intention. They are without that. They don't have that creative potential. And they're jealous of us for having that potential. On top of that, because they don't have that ability, they have to invert things. All they can do is do mimicry. All they can do is copy something. And the best way to copy something is to make a synthetic version of that same thing. So since, the 80s, really, you could say it goes back further, but definitely since the 80s with the dawning of the earliest form of the internet and the dawning of the Ethernet, which is a net of ether, obviously, and an Archon Matrix of control of energy and control of life forms. They want every single being, whether it's a plant, an animal, an insect, a human, connected to this web of etheric control that is electrically based, that is digitally based. And the reason they want to do this is not only do they want to harvest our energy, which is like our emotions, and the main emotion they want to harvest are negative emotions. They can't, as far as I've ever been able to read in any of the mystery school traditions, or any of the other Aboriginal religions that talk about these beings, like the Native Americans, they call it Wetiko, and the Islamic tradition, they call them the Jinn, and the Gnostics, they call it the Archons, and the Steiner, they call it Ahrimanic forces, and Christianity, they call them, demons, which is obviously very helpful. It's not very descriptive. They don't talk about this type of energy parasitism, that this parasitical nature of these lower dimensional beings, and they just don't talk about that. But some of the other ones do, and it's a form of spiritual sickness. It's a form of spiritual sickness. Really kind of sums it up. It's an astral etheric mentality and sickness of Western civilization itself that has been largely influenced through this archontic influence. These archons are altering our ideologies and our belief systems to become more like them, to become more synthetic, to become more artificial. According to the Gnostics, they hate us. We are both, the Archons and ourselves, are children of Gaia, of children of Sophia, the Aeon Sophia. But we are endowed with a much higher level of spirit and original intention and creativity that they don't have. They don't have the spark for that. And so they hate us for that. And so they want to trap us in this matrix. I mean, not exactly like the Matrix in the movie, but a form of, it may eventually become like that type of a matrix, but right now it's not that. And we're still already really trapped in their materialistic scientism of a matrix that is all about what's physical, all about digitalization, all about harvesting and colonizing biology with technology and turning it into a giant grid system connected to the Ethernet that would basically turn us into beings like them. They're like machines. They're like astral etheric machines. And they want us to be like them. They want us to be machines. Now, could be multiple reasons for this. One could be that they may be able to actually possess us if we reach such a level of complete bodily degeneration that we become transhuman, that we become cyborgs, we become man-machines. The singularity. Of course, you know, these Silicon Valley elites always talk about the singularity as if it's some wonderful event, and they always say it's coming very soon. We can only hope it does not come as soon as they say it's going to come, because that doesn't leave us a whole lot of time if they're going to get it done in like 3 to 5 years or 10 years. Even 10 years is too soon, much less 3 or 5. But these Archons not only want to do that to us, they want to do that to all life on Gaia. They want to change the entirety of the Earth and its biosphere, the electromagnetosphere, that is essentially Gaia's energy and aura that surrounds the Earth and bolsters life, growth, development, and consciousness on an organic level. And everything is evolved within the Gaian matrix and aura. That it's, you know, there's a human resonance, and there is interference from these technologies with the natural frequency and resonance coming off Gaia Sophia, the Earth. And it interferes with that. And this has been noted by plenty of people, but they don't always reference it to Gnosticism and the fact that Gaia is a divine, sentient, planetary spirit that guides the evolution of all beings on this planet. And that it's interfering with the ability for her to do that. And it's interfering with our ability to connect with her, as well as animals to connect with her, and plants, and every other form of life that exists on this planet organically. It's all being disrupted by these archontic technologies. It's all being disrupted by 5G, 6G, you know, HARP, all the cell phone towers, all the cell phones, all this interconnectivity and this digitalization interferes with the natural connectivity we have energetically with the Earth, with Gaia herself. We no longer are able to feel and connect with her the way that we used to. And honestly, in some sense, it's kind of like Final Fantasy VII, which is what's so weird about Final Fantasy VII, a game I've played many times in my life and was glad to see this remake and everything. Of course, they want you to think it's about carbon or some other, you know, issue, when it's really about the absolute transformation of the Gaian resonance aura into a false synthetic archontic resonance and frequency-based world where we will be completely shut off, utterly and totally shut off. And if this completely wraps the entire planet, say with Starlink, with the 5G satellites, we'll be completely cut off from the Gaian energy resonance, from the Schumann resonance. It will be drowned out by all these artificial frequencies, and humanity will lose contact with the divinity that is the Earth, with essentially our mother, our guiding planetary spirit that helps us and evolves with us. Not only will either she'll evolve beyond us and leave us behind, and we'll just basically become the eighth sphere, a lower dimensional realm basically run by Archon influences and transhumanist world civilization that will become completely static and degenerate, while thinking that it's beyond human and better than ever. Or it will not only destroy us and transform us, it will transform the Earth and all life forms on it. I mean, there's agendas to tag with biometric surveillance almost every single being on the Earth. I mean, I've read these articles myself, and I'm not going to try and show them tonight. Because I'm not using that software tonight. But I mean, you can go look this up for yourself. There are agendas to not only harvest and colonize us for biometric data, get us to use wearables, and then get those wearables eventually turned into nanotechnology and internals, and then we will become transhuman. They will also do this to animals and plants and insects and nature itself. There are agendas out there to do this. This is an Archon agenda. This is the Archon agenda, to transform the entire biosphere and ourselves into Archons under their influence. This is the agenda. This is the darkest of their agendas, and it explains a lot of what the elite are doing in a world that doesn't seem to make much sense to some people. Why they would want to do all these things, what these weird things they talk about, like the singularity and turning people into data harvesting centers, and biodigital surveillance, biodigital enhancements and augmentations. All these things are very strange unless you understand the deeper, lower dimensional influence that it's stemming from. And it's really their agenda that's being fulfilled, essentially, by Silicon Valley and technocrats and power elites against the rest of us. Now, what they think they get out of it, well, it's probably, you can imagine, probably like immortality and power and control and what have you. But they don't realize that they're essentially going to not only alter us but the entire earth, and they, some of them totally know that, and they're perfectly fine with that. But they're short-sighted. They think they'll become gods when really they'll just become much weaker beings that aren't even human anymore. They're subhuman. They're not superhuman. They'll be subhuman, and it will be not a super Earth, it'll be a sub-Earth at that point. Sophia will be degenerated and enclosed within an Archon influence of frequency and control that will stifle her organic processes, which will stifle the development of all the organic life forms on the planet, and will turn us into the Archons, or as near as you can get. And they may be able to actually take possession of us if we degenerate far enough. There's some speculation on that they may actually be able to enter our changed bodies, these Archons, and take us over. And once we degenerate far enough and become machine-like enough, that is a type of body that they could actually interact with, one that's cut off from the higher planes and cut off from their higher spiritual bodies. They would then be able to, so to speak, ensoul into us and maybe take us over and become us. They are a failed evolution, these Archons. And they know that if we succeed spiritually and evolutionarily on our spiritual path of development, that they will lose their ability to influence us, to feed on us, and to harvest us, and even to maybe try to jump back into the chain of evolution that they failed miserably and fell out of. Of course, I don't think that's actually what would happen, but as far as we can tell, that's what they think would happen. They think that where they can hitch a ride on humanity after devolving us to jump back into the chain. And that's not, and we're not going to let that happen, of course. We have a much better future ahead of us than that, obviously. But the statements by RFK Jr. are very concerning. And, this isn't just about Palantir and wearable technology and, what the next couple of years is showing may come in this country, in this world, in the Western world. The Archon influence is pervading every aspect of our society. Everything is synthetic. We have synthetic communication. We have synthetic relationships. We have a synthetic connection to the earth. We see it as something to be conquered, something to be, turned into whatever we see fit to turn it into. We see animals as harvestable and without souls. Certainly in the Western world, not everybody sees it that way, but even the ones that do think that the animals are, sacred, they don't really see them as sacred the way that I'm talking about. They see them as almost the same as us. Now, I don't see them the same as us. They are like our little brothers and sisters who are here to be protected. And we're here to help guide their evolution, as just like Sophia guides our evolution. At the same time, they are our sacred brothers and sisters. All life on this planet is sacred. And while there may be a harmonic and energetic reciprocity in how we consume, which obviously we do not have right now with Gaia, or with the life forms that are on this or on Gaia with us, we can have that. There can be an equilibrium. There can be an energetic spiritual reciprocity that exists between all of us. We're not there, obviously. We're not there at all right now. We are in the exact opposite place, and the Archon influences turned us into mindless consumers, feeding on the earth and destroying the earth, not through carbon emissions or so-called climate change, but simply consuming it. We're consuming the earth. We are devouring the earth under Archon influence. We are turning the earth into a synthetic environment. We are turning the earth into an Archon environment. We are turning ourselves into Archons and then turning the environment into an Archontic habitable environment. And we're acting like Archons the way we interact with other life forms on the planet. We treat them as energy, as food, as opposed as to beings that are developing and evolving with us. And they may also be food, but that's not their entire existence. That is not their sole purpose for existence. There is a harmony that is supposed to exist between us and the other life forms on this Gaian environment, and it does not currently exist at the moment except for certain pockets. And it used to be far more prevalent, say, in the ancient world, in the ancient mystery traditions. And, they ate animals, but they didn't just, mass consume 45 billion cows a year or chickens a year without thought, without any sort of reverence or sacred reciprocity, at least with intention to acknowledge what they've given us. There is a spiritual reciprocity that must exist between sentient, conscious beings and the environment in which they inhabit, not to mention with the planet itself, the planetary spirit, such as Gaia and Sophia. But with the very beings that we interact with, there's nothing wrong with eating other animals. Other animals eat other animals. But we have to do it with a certain level of spiritual intentionality that is primed for harmonic reciprocity, an energetic reciprocal relationship that is not one that is wholly consumptive in nature. That is the Archon influence. That is the path of becoming Archons ourselves. The Archon Matrix has pretty much taken over the entirety of Western civilization. I mean, is without a doubt, everything is synthetic. Absolutely everything is synthetic. We have synthetic education, we have synthetic medicine, we have synthetic relationships, we have synthetic communication, we have synthetic media content and entertainment, we have synthetic actual physical environments with all the chemicals and pesticides and all the radio frequencies and 5G, 6G frequencies everywhere. Everything has become completely archontic and synthetic at this point. But it's not too late, or I wouldn't be making this video. It is in no way too late. Not at all. But we have to do it now, in our lifetime. Because it may be too late at the end of our lifetime, to be honest. We have to wake up and realize that we have a sacred environment, a divine spiritual environment that is the planetary spirit Gaia, our mother, not only the mother of everything on this planet, but in the Gnostic cosmology, she is our actual mother, who just happened to become our environment. And then we have our sacred little brothers and sisters that are animals and are future humans. They are future humans. And plants are future animals. And the mountains are future plants, so to speak. Not like the literal mountains, but in terms of esoteric cosmology, besides Gnosticism, you have the aphorism, a rock becomes a plant an animal a man a spirit a god, and so on. And this is like an aphorism, an axiom of the occult mystery school traditions of Rosicrucianism, Theosophy, Anthroposophy, all of them. And I'm sure Gnosticism knew this as well, that our environment, the earth itself, is a sacred divine environment. And all the beings on it are on their way to becoming man. Man, thus, at the peak of that chain of spiritual development, has a sacred duty to help guide and guard and protect the development of all the other species on the planet. It's a sacred duty. It's not like what Yahweh said, you could basically say is Yaldabaoth, Chief Archon. He said, you take the earth as yourself. At least that's how it's been interpreted. The earth is not our plaything. The earth is not here to be consumed. Our brothers and sisters here, plants and animals, are not here to be simply consumed. They're to be guided, protected, and yes, they can be used as food. But there has to be a special sacred reciprocity that exists in that relationship between us and them. And whatever we take, we need to try to give back at the same spiritual reciprocal level that we take it. And, this is coming to a head. The Archon influence is coming to a head. We have never been deeper in the Archon influence, but at the same time, they have never been more susceptible to being discovered as the dark, lower dimensional influence that they are. And just the fact that seeing Gnosticism has risen back up as a sacred spiritual school of thought when it was totally stamped out is just another indicator that humanity still has time to right its path, get out from under this Archon influence, reconnect with Gaia Sophia, and take our planetary environment and ourselves to a higher level than we've ever been before. But it's not going to come from digital environments. It's not going to come from technology. It's going to come from connectivity with your own spiritual side of your nature and the spiritual side of nature itself, of the deity that is our mother and our planet. Reconnecting with her, becoming in closer contact, an energetic connection to the actual environment you live in, as opposed to disassociation and disconnection and turning it into a synthetic environment, an archontic environment, is not the way to go. It is developing a much deeper level of biological and spiritual awareness of not only ourselves, but our environment and all the animals and beings on the planet. And also reconnecting with the planet herself. And that is the way forward. That is the way towards our true path of development. There's two paths before us. One is archontic, one is Sophianic. One is transhumanism, one is superhumanism. Becoming more psychic, more spiritual, more connected to the different planes of existence, not trying to turn our environment into a synthetic version of those planes and then connect with it like that. That is absolutely de-evolution. And so, after seeing Kennedy talk about this week, I definitely had to do a video, and I wanted to go a little bit deeper into Gaia Sophia and our environment, our actual physical environment, and the planetary spiritual deity that is Gaia Sophia, our mother and our earth, and our relationship to her, and how fundamental that is to reestablish a connection to our sacred divine environment as spiritual beings that exist on it. We don't have, it's a lie to say that we've always been like this, that humanity's always consumed like this, and that it's like a locust that is just parasitical and just destroys everywhere that it goes and is just there to consume up an entire habitat and move on. We have done that to a degree, but that is not who we are. If you look back over history, I'm a history major. And besides, not just that, but I've also studied far beyond what my degree was in, and some of my other degrees. But the history of humanity is not one of being parasitical. It is definitely one of being warlike between ourselves, but we never just obliterated our environment like we're doing now for the last couple hundred years. That is from the archontic influence. That is the archontic influence. 10,000 years ago, 7,000 years ago, We lived, plenty of civilizations, like the Egyptians, lived in harmony with their environment. They were not just destroying their environment. They were not setting up synthetic versions of their environment. That is a lie. Anyone who thinks otherwise, they need to go back and look at history. So, the Yuval Noah Hararis of the world are incorrect in what they've told people, like in his book Sapiens, and are also absolutely amoral trash for saying that we need to overthrow God, turn the environment into a digital form of it, and do the same thing to ourselves. He is under archontic influence, and so is everyone else that thinks like he does. There is a Sophianic influence, as John Lim Lash likes to call it, the organic light that is witnessed at the end of a mystery school initiation, where you encounter the actual spiritual entity, Sophia herself, in the caves of the earth at the end of an initiation of the greater mysteries. You encounter what he called the organic light. He has seen the organic light. I have not. But it makes sense to me. The wisdom goddess presides over the mysteries. And if you are initiated into the greatest mysteries, you encounter the wisdom goddess, the patron and matron of the mystery school traditions and Gnosticism. The path of Gnosis is before us. All that matters and all that was really the only option we have is to take the path of Gnosis and develop that level of reconnection with Gaia and with ourselves. And that's, that's our path forward. I mean, you can tell RFK Jr., he can go shove that idea right back where he found it. And we're not going to be doing any wearables. We're not going to be going transhuman here. And we see right through this agenda. We see right through the archontic agenda. And we're not going to play that game. We have the path of Gnosis is before us. Sophia is ready to be reconnected with. And the Archons are ready to be thrown into the mists of history along with their influence. And, I see a great future lying before us, but there's still, we still have a fight ahead of us before we get to that wonderful Sophianic future through the path of Gnosis. So, my name is Sam Robinson. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and share this around. There will be more coming. I also want to go through some of the ideas of the path of Gnosis and what is Gnosis. And I want to also go over some other versions of Gnosticism, if people are interested, that, somewhat differ, but are still very interesting from the one that I've been talking about here on this channel. So, once again, my name is Sam Robinson. Thank you for watching. This is the Gnostic Syncretist podcast and channel. And we will be seeing you next time.